want to know how you see the world. Do you seek out urban beauty? Or do you create your own landscapes? Maybe it's outdoor adventure that makes your world turn. Let us bring your passion into focus and give you the best view yet. At Botwin Eye Group and Oculus Optical, we defy the norms by combining advanced medical eye care with Santa Fe's finest selection of luxury and artful eyeglasses. Botwin Eye Group and Oculus Optical, 2 locations in Santa Fe.
Welcome back, everyone, for another great episode with the Santa Fe Gloom podcast. Real quick, I've got some text messages and DMs about my puppy Biscuit. So they were Ray, which I'll introduce you in a second, Ray. But if you haven't heard on our last YouTubes, I've got like the most cutest little puppy, and he barks on the YouTube channel.
Right? Oh, that's cute.
So what we're thinking about doing is every time Biscuit barks, and I better not say his name because he's sleeping right now, we're going to do some type of like donation to an animal shelter or something like that. I'll come up with something more formal. So because he's been doing it, but right now he's sleeping. So just wanted to throw that out there. The Santa Fe Gloom and Zozobra, we're all about community vibes. So, but everyone, today we have probably one of the most special guests, especially here in Santa Fe, in Ray Sandoval, who's the Zozobra event chairman. So Ray, thank you so much, dude. I know how busy you are, especially now that we're like in Zozobra season, for jumping on and talking to us.
No, you got it. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. So Ray, tell us about your love for Zozobra. When did it start?
Yeah, you know what? It's kind of it's a little strange. You know, we have a big family, right? So we would take turns at taking the cousins. So I remember that my first Zozobra, I was like maybe 3, and it was my parents' turn to actually take all of us to Zozobra. And so we had like, my gosh, like 10 or 12 cousins that went with us. And I was the smallest, the youngest of us. So when we got into the field, my dad put me on his shoulders so I could see. And I was just like in awe of this like monster that was standing before us. And then all of a sudden it got dark and the lights turned off and he started moving. And I was like, oh my God, it's like alive. And I remember my cousins, like, they grabbed my dad and my mom's like legs and they put their heads in, they didn't want to see it. Right. And I'm like looking down at them like, they're crazy. This is the coolest thing ever. And I remember Zozobra burns and he falls to the ground and people cheer and my cousins are cheering. And like, I'm almost in tears, right, that they burnt Zozobra. Mm-hmm. And so I guess that's when my Zozobra love affair began, is back when I was 3 years old.
Got it. And what inspired you to be the chairman?
You know, I think that, so first of all, you know, I'll talk a little bit about like what it means right now, but it was kind of an evolution. You know, first of all, you see this amazing, you know, tradition that we have in our city. And, you know, tradition, that's an important word in Santa Fe, right? We keep traditions, right? Fiestas has been going on for more than 300 years. The city's 400 years old. Indian Market just celebrated 100 years. Zozobra is about to turn 100. So when you say the word tradition in Santa Fe, that word carries a lot of weight. And so, first of all, to be one of the people that's responsible for carrying on this tradition is an immense privilege, and it's a huge burden too, because you want to make sure that you can continue this on for future generations. And you know, when I first grew up, I mean, this was fun. I mean, you're burning a 50-foot marionette in the middle of downtown Santa Fe, and everybody that you knew came to see Zozobra burn. And so there was always this fun aspect to it. And then as I started growing older and I realized that the Kiwanis Club of Santa Fe was the one that put Zozobra on, and that what they would do is sell tickets and t-shirts and so forth. And so obviously the proceeds would go to pay off all Zozobra's bills, and then whatever was left over went back into our community, either in the form of scholarships or nonprofit that help kids. And so since 1964, if you adjust for inflation, the Kiwanis Club Zozobra has given back $3.5 million to kids in our community. And so we're really, really proud of that. But, you know, for me, what it really is that, like, how can you not want to love this event? This is an event that looks back at our past and our traditions, but then it invests in our future with our kids. And so like you've got the best of both worlds. You're looking at the past, you're doing something in the present, but you're helping the future. And so it's something that has, I always say that people that come into kind of the Zozobra, universe, they get bitten by the Zozobra bug and there's no cure for it.
And who started it?
So Will Schuster, an artist Will Schuster has kind of an interesting story. So here's this kid, 18 years old, in Pennsylvania, studying art, gets drafted in World War I, goes to France to fight for the Allies, gets mustard gas, comes back to Philadelphia, and is on his deathbed, right? And so his cousin is a physician and tells him, you got to do something. You're either going to die here in Philadelphia or you need to move out west because your lungs are just completely damaged by the mustard gas. And so Schuster described that his decision was to move out west and die of old age and whiskey rather than stay in Philadelphia and die as a young man. So he moves out to Santa Fe and he steps off the train and he meets John Sloan, who is kind of this Renaissance guy. He's an artist, he's a sculptor, he's a painter, he's an inventor, he's a poet. And the two of them kind of form this friendship. And, he kind of Schuster becomes John's kind of apprentice. And as Schuster gets healthier, and as he, the high desert air helps him heal his lungs, he begins to get his energy back and he begins to get this kind of vigor for life. And so Schuster and John form a group called the Los Cinco Pintores. And those 5 painters are the reason that Santa Fe became the art gallery, the art enclave that it is today. Without them, we wouldn't be, in the arts. And so they moved into a house on Camino Monte del Sol. The locals called them 5 nuts in a hut because they thought these guys were crazy. There wasn't a market for art the way that we know it today. And so one of them would get a painting or they would do a sculpture and they would sell it. And then all 5 of them would live off of those proceeds until the next person kind of sold their painting. And so on Christmas Eve of 1923, Schuster sells a sculpture for a couple of $100s, which is like a gold mine. So he goes to them and he says, listen, I'm tired of eating rice and beans. This new hotel, La Fonda, has just opened up. Let's go and have tequila and let's actually have beef. Like, let's have meat and celebrate Christmas Eve. And then, hopefully somebody sells something before New Year's, but let's just go blow it. And so they all agree to go down to La Fonda. So they're in the bar at La Fonda. They just ordered food. And Schuster gets really upset because everyone's in a bad mood, right? They're just kind of in a pissy mood. And he's like, I worked really hard on this sculpture. I'm treating you guys all to this. And you guys are just like in a funk. And so he would carry with him kind of a sketch pad. And so he grabbed the sketch pad and he took out pieces of paper and he handed it to all of them. And he took a pencil from behind his ear and he demanded that they write down what was bothering them. And so as they did that, he then gathered it up, put it in the center of the table, got the candle that was on the table and lit it on fire and kind of declared that their gloom was gone. Well, of course, the bartender comes back in, tosses them out on their butt, right? And so they're in the plaza and it starts snowing and they just all start laughing, right? And because they're in this absurd moment. And so Schuster at that moment really understands that there's this ability, the power of writing down things, right? We all know what that is. I mean, we sign contracts, like there's a power to writing down stuff. And so by writing down what was bothering you and then burning it away, you could really release yourself of this kind of gloom. And so this idea starts ruminating in Schuster's head of how do I do this? And again, they're artists and they're trying to experiment and they're trying to do different things. So the next spring, he goes down to Mexico and he witnesses a Good Friday celebration in which a effigy of Judas is paraded around the town and people throw shoes at it, they spit at it, and it lands up in the plaza and they burn it, right? And so Schuster's idea of letting go of your gloom, now he needs a vehicle for doing it. And so he decides to marry these 2 ideas. But what's so unique about Zozobra is that if you look around the world, people burn effigies all the time. They're either religious or they're political. Zozobra is not religious or political. Zozobra is created from the negative energy that you and I put out into the world when we let each other down, when we let ourselves down. And I love this concept of gloom. right? Because gloom is not, it's not evil, it's not malicious, but it realizes that there's an energy that we as human beings put out into the ecos. And we can either decide to continue to kind of be gloomy, or we can decide to be hopeful. And so, one of the great things they've always said about Santa Fe is that you can say that Santa Fe is controversial. You could say that Santa Fe is a lot of things, but one of the things is that there's so much hope in this that it really is able to dispel kind of that Zozobra gloom.
And so people write letters or notes and they put it in Zozobra, correct? And then
Yeah, absolutely. And people will give us things. So we'll get old love letters, we'll get divorce papers, we'll get mortgages that they paid off. We will get speeding tickets, arrest warrants. I've had women who have survived breast cancer who've burned bras. I've had a guitar that was burned. I've had a wedding album after a very bad divorce that was burned. And so anything that people symbolically want to get rid of, you can put inside Zozobra to kind of exercise that gloom.
and you mentioned tradition, right? Uh, Ray, how long have you been the chairman or involved at a leadership level with Zozobra? How many years?
So I started when I was 6, and I definitely wasn't in any kind of leadership at that point. At about 18, I took over the fireworks, so that was
Yeah.
became my department. And then in 2012, I took over as the Zobra event chairman. So I'm in charge of the entire event. So Zozobra has been a part of my life for almost the entire time that I've been on this planet.
Got it. So in terms of tradition, uh, I'm sure there's always some pushback, right? Because again, we're burning a massive Muppet downtown Santa Fe,
Yep.
and people outside looking in are like, "What the heck
Yep.
is Ray doing?
Yep.
What is going on?" Uh, Give us just a brief breath of how you've been able to like overcome some of those obstacles and keep Zozobra your whole life right going. Obviously, my whole life because I'm born and raised Santa Fe and all about Zozobra. What's your magic in your leadership to overcome some of those barriers?
Well, it's twofold. One is that it's kind of that shocked outsider that gets here and it's like, oh my God, they're stringing up this thing that looks like a human being and they're chanting, burn him, and they're like burning him, right? And that kind of criticism is actually easily dispelled with when you kind of tell the mythology of the Zobra. And so kind of the mythology is what we've been talking about. As human beings, we put out this negative energy, it goes in and accumulates and it turns into this spirit. And that's why the Zobra doesn't have any legs, right? He's like Casper the ghost because he's a spirit. And as this negative energy accumulates, he gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And he's out there and he's, raiding things and doing bad things. And so the city's like, how do we get this guy out of hiding? And so they decide to invite him to a party in his honor right before fiestas. And of course, that's the city's biggest celebration. So Zozobra gets this invitation, and the city folks are like, hey, we're going to do Zozobra in. And Zozobra is like, this is my Trojan horse. I'm going to be in the middle of downtown Santa Fe. I'm going to be able to take over the city. So Zozobra dresses up in a bow tie because he's the guest of honor, shows up at Fort Marcy. He lets everybody play around him, right? They're throwing this party. It gets dark, and then Zozobra uses his power to throw the city into darkness. And his plan is that he then takes our kids away from them and he devoids them of any kind of hope. And they become the gloomies because now they're his little minions. And Zozobra is going to use those gloomies against the parents to take over the city. Well, the city kind of is like, oh my God, he's taking our kids away. So they find brave townspeople that come with pitchforks and torches to kind of challenge the Zobra, right? Well, the Zobra is like, really, you're going to send like pitchforks at me? So he's more annoyed than anything, and he's actually kind of laughing at how ridiculous this is. But what happens is that the little gloomies see the light from the torch, and it wakes them up from this trance that the Zobras put them in, and so they realize where they are and they run back to their parents. Well, the Zobra just gets infuriated, and so he's then able to scare the townspeople. And so now you're at a point in the story where Zozobra is going to win. He's going to come in and take over Santa Fe. And here's the most beautiful part of the Zozobra mythology. And so Schuster says that just as we created Zozobra through all of our misdeeds and the negative energy, there's a dichotomy to us as humans. There's another part of us when we're loving, when we're generous, when we give of ourselves. that puts out an energy as well, right? And so as the kids go back and join their parents, they forget for a moment that the Zobra's there. They forget how scared they are of him. And there's this overwhelming love from being reunited with their kids. And that puts out this energy. And so the fire spirit is able to appear. Now, the fire spirit hasn't had months and months of time to accumulate. So the Zobra's 50 feet tall and the fire spirit's only 5 feet tall. And when we think of the fire spirit is kind of this Jack Frost character. It's an adolescent male, right? And Schuster used to write, well, who would be stupid enough to take on Zozobra? Well, it's that adolescent teenage male that's like, nobody can do anything to me. I'm going to live forever. And so there's this kind of arrogance. And so the fire spirit quickly learns that light and flame start weakening Zozobra's powers. And so the fire spirit continues to gather energy from the crowd, and he starts, throwing fireworks up into the sky. And as he does that, it continues to weaken and lessen Zozobra's power until a moment that the fire spirit's able to then actually ignite Zozobra and kind of do Zozobra in. And so when we talk about this, there's a lesson in this, right? Are we as human beings going to be like Zozobra and continue to put gloom into the world, or are we going to be like the fire spirit and put light? And so when you explain that to the outsider, that we're not just stringing up somebody and burning them at the stake, that this really has this deep, powerful meaning, then it's really kind of easy to be able to deal with that criticism. The more difficult criticism comes from our locals, right? And at first it was really hurtful. And you get like, the day after Zozobra, I mean, there's so much on social media about how they didn't like the way you look, blah, 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 so forth. And so at first I took it very personally, and I was just kind of like, oh my God, like my team and I, we worked so hard. And now, David, I actually take it as a badge of honor, right? Because if people didn't care, they wouldn't criticize, they wouldn't do these kind of things. And so the fact that they care so deeply is that, I've stopped taking it personally, and I've started reading some of the criticism and saying, hey, is that a fair criticism, right? We all own this tradition. The Kiwanis Club is the legal title owner, but I always like to say that the citizens of Santa Fe are the equitable title owners. We own this all together, and so people's voices matter. Now, we got a lot of flack during the Decades Project because people went, what are you doing? Right? You're dressing Zozobra in a Thriller jacket. You're dressing Zozobra, in a fedora. Like, that's not traditional. And what I would want to say to those locals who are just like, have you lost your mind? I haven't. What it is and what I've understood about this tradition is that if we don't engage young people, we are going to lose our tradition, right? Right now, Zozobra competes with augmented reality. Zozobra competes with video games that are, 4K video games that look like it's realistic. We compete with special effects from movies. And so if we don't meet kids on their own level, we're never going to be able to do that. And so, I will say is there's been a lot of criticism about the Decades Project, but the one thing for me is that this year during our art contest, we had 600 kids from the city of Santa Fe, 600 entries, right? 613 to be exact, of kids who submitted Zozobra drawings, and Zozobra had earpods in. Zozobra was playing video games. Zozobra was dressed like they were. He had a backpack. That was the magic of the Decades Project, is that instead of Zozobra being this old kind of weird thing that Santa Fe does, we met kids by dressing him up as Voldemort, by dressing him up in these different things, and we really brought kids back into our tradition.
Yeah, I think that's one of the magic sauces, right, that you've been able to have on that leadership is incorporating the youth, the kids,
Yep.
to keep that tradition, because like us as kids, that's where we got hooked on Zozobra.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely. And when I started, there was like, you couldn't touch Zozobra. You couldn't see him being constructed. You couldn't do it. And one of the things that we do is now we blow the doors off of that. We need kids, right? Come stuff him. Come learn how he's made. Come do these things so that way people can actually see and touch and feel. Come be our poster artist. Come be our t-shirt artist. Come sing the national anthem. Where can we fit our talented youth into this tradition? And then, like I said, once they get bitten by the Zozobra bug, they're hooked.
Ray, can you see my screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is a great video.
This is one. I think this is on your channel, right? One of your videos of. So I think everything you said is right on, man. I think this is obviously super cool. I also think if you look at that crowd, I mean, how many people are there?
Yeah, it's 65,000, and one of the other things is I hear constantly, well, locals don't come. Locals don't come, right? Well, I got to tell you, 39,000 people last year were Santa Fe, right? Another 15 were from New Mexico. So I want someone to tell me another event in the city where 39,000, we're about 80,000 right now population, where half of the city shows up. So please, I'm really, that's one thing I get really upset with is we've done a lot to make sure our locals feel welcome. And half of our crowd, 39,000 folks, are Santa Fe.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. I was just going to bring that up. I think when you do get those emails or comments, but look at that crowd, that's proof in the pudding that people are behind this. And now speak on 100th year, which is this year. So 100 years strong. So from our Gloom family, from our soccer family, right, we thank you for getting us from, I guess it was 15 years ago, right, to now. So talk us through the 100th year.
The 100th year is just really special. I think that, we kind of take it for granted, right? We live in a 400-year-old city. Fiestas is 300 years old. Indian Market just took over 100. And so we kind of take these for granted, but we have to remember the country is only, 200, like the Declaration of Independence will be 250 years in 2026. We're a young country. And so in New Mexico, when we have these milestones where we've been doing these things for 100 years, we really have to celebrate. And so one of the things that I'm really proud of is all of these special projects that we have that are marking the centennial. And so Zozobra will have a bike trail. Zozobra has a beer. Zozobra has a sparkling wine. Zozobra has a margarita. Zozobra has a coffee brand. And most importantly, Zozobra has a soccer team, right? One of the things is the Santa Fe Gloom. And we are so proud that Zozobra is etched into the fabric of our community in so many ways. And I want to thank you. I mean, you came to me with this idea about the soccer team and you were looking for a name. And, we are just really, really proud because number one, sports is so important because, just as our traditions teach us things, sports teach us things, right? It teaches us how to lose. It teaches us how to cooperate. It teaches us how to win. But it does all of these things that are so important to learn life lessons. And so to have sports as a part of this and now to have a sports team that carries on Zozobra's legacy, what more could you ask for? I mean, I think it's just an amazing partnership. So thank you for the foresight. Thank you for the opportunity. We are just so happy to have the Santa Fe Gloom and to have our little monster a part of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk us through, if you know this, Ray?
Sure.
This is my curveball.
Okay.
The origin of Old Man Gloom. I don't think you've touched on that, on how Zozobra got his nickname.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first Zozobra happens in Will Schuster's backyard. And he reaches out to Gus Ballman, who is kind of this marionette guy, and he did these beautiful marionettes, and they completely miscommunicate. So Gus Ballman shows up with a Zozobra head that's like for a marionette, and Zozobra and Schuster created a 5-foot body. So you have this little pinhead. So they burn it, and they're like, that's ridiculous. But people really enjoyed it, so they try again in 25. And in 25, they call him Old Man Groucher. And, Schuster's kind of thinking about this, and he's like, that's just not a good name, and it needs to be Spanish. And so he's like, I don't know what to do. So he goes down to the New Mexican, and he asks Dana Johnson, who's the editor of the Santa Fe New Mexican, and says, can you help me? We need a Spanish name for Old Man Groucher, right? And so they go into a Spanish English dictionary and they're reading, and they're like trying to come up. And he's like, okay, they look up the Spanish word for grouch and they look up the Spanish word for, misery and so forth. And all of a sudden, Dana Johnson goes, I have something for you, Zozobra. And he goes, oh my God, what does it mean? And he says it means gloom. And he goes, well, gloom, yes, absolutely. That's what makes you grouchy. That's what makes you these kind of things. And so it was almost like a eureka moment where the moment that Dana Johnson said the word Zozobra, Schuster automatically changed that name. And so he wanted an English counterpart, and it no longer made any sense to call him Old Man Groucher. So we moved to Old Man Gloom. So that way the Spanish and the English would match up.
Perfect. Yeah. Groucher, I don't think makes for a good soccer name either.
No, 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 no. So
And the future of Zozobra, if you were to uh, fast forward 100 years, what do you think it looks like? Do you think it's following that tradition?
I think that what I hope to do is make sure that, there's a ritual to burn Zozobra, right? And so through the Decades Project, even when people are like, oh, you're doing crazy pop songs and you're doing, Zozobra's dressed up crazy, there's a ritual to burning Zozobra, right? The Gloomies have to descend and try to take over the city. The townspeople with their torches have to come back. The fire spirit has to engage in this battle in which the fire spirit can actually lose, right? So if the people of Santa Fe don't give the fire spirit enough positive energy, Zozobra could win, right? And so there are all of these things that there's a ritual to Zozobra, but the tradition has to be more than the ritual, right? And so one of the things that I think early on when I took over Zozobra in 2012, I was looking at something and I remember I don't know what I was watching, and I was watching this stuff on Opera, and I don't even know why I was watching it. It was like late night, and it just was on, and I was too lazy to change the channel. And one of the things is that this gentleman came out and said that Mozart and Beethoven would be very disappointed in us, and that kind of perked up my ear, and I was like, what? And what he said was that they wrote amazing music, they were geniuses, but that they would be shocked that opera had stayed so traditional and it hadn't incorporated modern music, right? And that was a really important point for me because that's when I was thinking about Zozobra is that how do you keep a tradition? And the way that you keep the tradition is that the ritual inside of the tradition must stay there. Gloomies always must come down. Torchbearers always must be there. But you have to interpret the tradition in a larger way that invites more people. And so to see all the kids out there with fake little wands, right? And Zozobra was never Voldemort. Zozobra was not the Thriller monster. Zozobra stole Voldemort's, hood, his cloak, and he stole his sword because he's a crafty little guy. He's always Zozobra, but I wanted Santa Fe to understand that you can break that traditional mold and still live up to the ritual, which is the heart of the tradition, and that we have to do that because if we don't pump in new ideas and new blood into our traditions, they are going to die. And that is the biggest thing that I worry about. And so I hope that at the end of this, that somehow I've left a legacy that people understand that they are gifted this tradition and how sacred it is and how important the ritual of burning this over is. But they hope that they have the creativity and the leadway to make it modern and relevant to generations to come.
When the Zozobra is coming down, when we finally burned him,
Yep.
what's your first thought?
It's kind of funny because this is a point of personal privilege. I get to light the Zobra and I get to cut him down. That's for all the stress, for all that's my kind of like I get to light him, and it always
How do
kind
you
of
light him?
so there's a fuse. So I have a highway flare, and most of our fireworks right now are lit by computer, right? Because it's all electronic and so forth. And one of the things is that I hope that whoever takes over from me will never ever use a fuse to light the Zobra. Like having, even though it's a highway flare, it's still a match. It's still fire, right? And the fact that a human being walks up to the Zobra and ignites him, that's really important. A human being has to destroy Zozobra, not a computer, not an electric spark. A human being with an open flame has to destroy Zozobra. So as I walk up to him, it really depends on what kind of year it was, right? There are times where I'm like, this has just been so much stress, and I'm like, goodbye, right? And then there's other times where I'm like, this has just been an amazing year. Everything's gone well. The weather's cooperated. And so I kind of look up at him and I'm kind of like sad that I got to say goodbye. And so I'll pause for a little bit and then finally ignite it and then kind of say goodbye. And then as the Zober just kind of comes crashing down, it's a relief because there's so many things that you want to do. And it's like we did it and we did it safely and nobody's gotten hurt and the Zobra has been burned for another year. And it's like we did it. We lived up to that promise that we made to everybody. and Zozobra is vanquished for one more year.
Got it. Ray, you've answered all my questions, man.
Great. Well, I love it. And, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity. Please, we want locals there. General admission ticket is $30. Kids 10 and under are free. I wish that I could say it was $10 to get in, but unfortunately, everything's gone up this day. We have to pay for security and a lot of different things, but we want locals to be there. We've provided 5,000 tickets to the governor for low income folks. You can reach out to the governor's office if that $30 is too much, for maybe your abuelita, or you want to come, or you're 15 and you don't have the $30. Please contact the governor's office. They have 5,000 tickets for low income and income challenge folks, just the folks that need to. We want you there. This is your tradition. Please come and enjoy and celebrate the 100th anniversary of the burning of the
This is one of the longest traditions, I would say, west of the Mississippi.
Yep, absolutely, right.
Yeah.
And that Burning Man thing over there, they got their start from one of their creators came to Zozobra in the early 1980s, and that's where they got the tradition. So you want to see the original Burning Man? We got it.
Right. Yeah, we're the OGs.
That's right.
Cool. Ray, thank you so very much. I want to
thank you so much, man.
No, you're welcome. I want to thank our sponsors too. Ray, all of these people. We've got Pantry Dose. Michael's the owner. He's just a recipient of the 40 under 40 business leaders. So thank you, Michael. City of Santa Fe Economic Development, Capital Ford, Age Friendly Senior Care, new sponsor. That's actually my company. So thank you for Age Friendly and all the caregivers helping our elderly age in place at home. And we've got the Pit Press, the new sponsor. They do a lot of our YouTube behind the scenes. They make us look good.
Nice.
And Sam's Club, Renee, also manager of Sam's Club, 40 under 40 recipient, Mercedes-Benz of Santa Fe, and Oculus Botwin. Thank you all so very much. Without your support, community support, Zozobra is not a thing. Gloom's certainly not a thing. So thank you all so very much. Ray, thanks, man. I know
Thanks, David.
We've crunched time. And go Zozobra, go Santa Fe Gloom. The future is so bright for both these organizations. Thank you for paving the path for so many leaders in our community.
Absolutely. And thank you for everything that you do for bringing this. And again, I want to thank your sponsors too. You're absolutely right. We can't do this without local support. So you sponsors are the backbone of our community. So thank you for everything that you do.
Yeah. Thank you, Ray. I'll be at Zozobra. Our Gloom players will be there. So thanks.